Hey everybody, it's Dan.
And Ron.
And this is a nominee, episode 20...
I guess 28.
28, yeah.
Possibly more.
So we made it past, we're not in the 27 club. There's a tendency of a lot of podcasts to meet untimely deaths after or during their 27th episode. That's what happened to Janis Joplin's podcast, Jim Morrison's podcast. Jimi Hendrix's podcast, but we're here. We're still here. This isn't like a Weekend at Bernie's situation. I'm actually like alive and recording.
I might not be. Janice sitting over here on the side certainly isn't. But, hey, Janice.
So today we looked at how many cartoons? We watched a lot of cartoons. At least I think we watched 8 or 10.
12.
12. So we watched 12 cartoons that involved cats.
Yeah, 10 of them in a row. There were a couple that Dan sent a link to me earlier, so we technically did not watch them together.
Right, and we also discussed Fritz the Cat, which we have both seen, but we did not watch tonight.
Right. But we may mention him again.
Yeah.
Because Fritz the Cat is an important cat in the history of film.
And I have the disc over there, so we have done a Bakshi episode already, but I feel like there's a lot to talk about when it comes to Ralph Bakshi, so maybe we'll go back there.
We did a Bakshi episode?
Yeah, we did the Spider-Man cartoon episode.
Right, the Bakshi Spider-Man. Yeah, that's true.
We did one other Bakshi cartoon, I think. New Adventures of Mighty Mouse, where he was kind of the executive producer /
Yes, the Mighty Mouse cocaine episode.
The big dude behind the scenes.
A very important, seminal Mighty Mouse cocaine episode.
And so we've kind of seen a lot of the progression of U.S. history, the history of technology, changing social attitudes, changing techniques of film through the lens of cartoons about cats, because the earliest short that we watched tonight was from 1916, and the most recent short we watched tonight was from 1986.
And for anyone out there who's really excited about cat cartoons, and I was hoping for all sort of memes about Grumpy Cat and any number of other cats, sorry, we stopped before the internet was
Grumpy Cat R.I.P.
Yeah,
I miss you, bro.
No, he wasn't born yet.
Oh yeah, but he's passed on to his Weekend at Bernie's phase. He's still acting in the world despite being dead.
Did the real Grumpy Cat die?
Grumpy Cat died, yeah.
Oh.
And then the Ugly Cat, or whatever his name was, died too. Like it's been a rough year for meme cats.
Wow.
Yeah, we're toasting a strong one to you guys over here in the control room.
Let's see. I've listed out the cartoons that we watched. We watched them in sort of somewhat random order, so I put them out here in terms of the historical, in terms of chronological order, with the exception of Felix the Cat, which spans a much wider range.
Right, Felix the Cat, I think, may have had the longest run of different cartoons over a longest period of time. Yeah, because the first Felix the Cat cartoon was 1919, and I believe they may still be making Felix the Cat shorts here and there.
Wow.
Even, at the very least, the latest one that we found was in the mid-90s, so
yeah,
that's a lot of cartoons and a lot of different time periods. So Felix the Cat ended up being kind of a perfect lens to focus ourselves on. Or what was it? Yeah, it's got to be the 90s if it's got the CGI 3D, yeah.
Yeah, the last of the Felix the Cat, called Twisted Tales of Felix the Cat, had some early CGI, which I marked as 1980s, which is clearly wrong. And updating to 1990. But shall we start with Krazy Kat?
Yeah, I guess start at the beginning. So
we watched 2 Krazy Kat cartoons.
Correct.
At the Circus and the Bugologist, both of them 1916. Both of them are in black and white and silent.
Yeah, and those were produced and released in the first year that Krazy Kat, as its own standalone strip outside of the Family Upstairs, was in publication. And they're very interesting because they're so different than modern cartoons.
Wait, did you say they started in the same year?
Yeah, because this is
so it started as both
so this is the first 10 years worth of the first 8 years worth of Krazy Kat Sunday pages, 1916
to 19. Okay, so Dan is holding a book that is about the size of a 2 volumes of the 2 volumes of the Encyclopedia Britannica. I would say that it consists just of Krazy Kat cartoons from 1916 to 1924.
Yep.
And how long did it actually run for?
Well, I have the last volume of the Krazy Kat,
which is much thinner.
Yeah, they did re-release this as a book like this, but the big hardcover books with like a massive amount of strips in them were very limited run. I got lucky to buy that when it was new, but I paid like $95 for it.
Damn.
Now they're going for like $350 to $400 for any of the volumes on eBay.
Wow.
And they're only like, I mean, if I bought it in college, that's only about 10 years old. So 1944, middle of 1944, George Harriman dies, and Theodore Hearst, who was a huge fan of the strip, said there's never going to be another Krazy Kat comic strip.
Wait, Theodore Hearst? Oh, I thought
William Randolph Hearst, excuse me.
Okay, thank you. I thought Dan had mentioned it to me a little earlier, and I thought I misremembered, because as far as I know, there's only one Hearst ever.
Yeah, and the history of the Krazy Kat comic strip is long and very strange. It was twice in one episode. Now, William Randolph Hearst's favorite comic strip that Hearst Papers ran, and Hearst and Pulitzer were the two giant newspaper barons of the time. So, and also comic strips were enormously popular, like daily comic strips were enormously popular on a magnitude that is very difficult to imagine now, but people would talk about them. It was kind of like a shared cultural item, the same way that you might talk to somebody about like a Netflix show that you just watched. And this continued into like well through the 30s and the 40s, when Lil Abner, Al Cap, the comic strip where Frank Frazetta first got his start as an assistant. When Lil Abner got married, that was on the front page of multiple national papers. It was massive news.
So not just where Little Abner ran. It was
other papers covered it because it was huge. You know, it was kind of like the last episode of Friends running or something, or like
and CBS News talking about it.
Yeah. It was large enough to be a cultural event, and the newspaper, the comics sections were structured much differently than they are now. So especially Sunday pages, because Sunday pages, back then they would just give the artist the full page. The books that I'm holding right now are maybe about half the size of what the actual Sunday pages would be, but it's like very difficult to print an affordable book at that size. So there are some books where they're going to print old Sunday pages at the full size, but they're incredibly expensive and don't tend to stay in print for very long. But they would just give them free reign on the page, whereas now if you're turning in a Sunday page for I don't know, Zits or something, I didn't want to say Dilbert because the guy went alt-right. Scott Adams.
No, but what's the...
Zits, it's a very mediocre comic strip about kids in their adolescence and their parents having trouble using the email, as they call it.
That was your go-to, a very mediocre cartoon? Or is it... I didn't realize... Is it really popular?
I mean, Dilbert's a pretty mediocre cartoon. I mean, they're both pretty popular by today's standard. But the thing is, like, today, the newspaper comic strip is not... It's basically a dead art form. There's a couple people still getting paid to put them in the newspaper. But the Sunday page, you're never going to get a full-size page.
Oh, no.
You're going to get maybe a third of a page, if that, if it's like a really popular strip. The panels have to be the same size so that it can be run horizontally, vertically, or whatever which way the paper wants to rearrange them, depending on what strips they've syndicated. And as a result, I mean, also the level of draftsmanship, just because, like, if you can draw well enough to draw the kind of stuff that people were drawing in comic strips in, say, the 1920s, you can get a much better job than being a comic strip writer now. So there's not an appeal. So you have these, like, a lot of strips where it looks like Dilbert or Zits, where It's these static, lifeless figures. They barely move from panel to panel. They only have 3 stock expressions. They're either like happy, surprised, or just sort of neutral.
Kind of like the Heathcliff episode we watched.
Yeah.
And any episode of the Super Friends. Well, no, that's one more than any of the Super Friends.
Right.
Even when you have all of them, the entire group, the entire Super Friends team, that's still one more expression.
Yeah, and so in the 1920s or 1930s, at the peak, the golden age of newspaper comics, you would have these things that would look sometimes as challenging, bizarre, and kind of just sort of oddly structured or laid out as like the Cubist paintings or modernist art that you would see in a fine art museum. And in fact, Harriman had a large following amongst the 1920s avant-garde. There was a ballet produced of Krazy Kat, and there were a couple essays written by like intellectual heavyweights of the time about Krazy Kat, which was not the case for something like, and I like a lot of these strips, but nobody was writing like heavy-duty intellectual criticism of, say, Polly and Her Pals or Gasoline Alley or something like that. Although a lot of the early Gasoline Alley Sunday pages are just like gorgeous. The same thing with Polly and Her Pals by Cliff Sterrett. But anyway, so we're watching these Krazy Kat shorts. They were what, like 3 minutes and
roughly
change?
3 minutes. So the first one was at the circus. There isn't much of a story in either one of these. At the circus, Ignatz is the mouse, and Ignatz wants to show. Wait, was there even a? Can't even remember the circus part. I just remember.
And the cartoons definitely deviate from the comics, because the comics, the strangest thing about Krazy Kat, I think, is that every single strip, give or take, has the same gag. Which, unlike a lot of modern newspaper comic strips where it just feels like the same gag every day.
Not me!
Right? The pointy-haired boss is an idiot. I am Dilbert. I cannot speak to women. I am actually Scott Adams. I'm going to get a mail-order bride and go out for Donald Trump.
Oh, let's see how let's follow Billy's path through the park. Let's follow Billy's path at home. Let's follow Billy's path in, and then it just gets a little weird. Not me!
Yeah, I mean, I'll see
that
something
was Family
interesting
Circus, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Family Circus was definitely the beginning of the end. Peanuts, I think, was the last great strip that was able to exist after basically the death of newspaper comics as TV became popular and as comic books came to be seen more and more as things specifically for children, which I don't think happened. That wasn't really, at least as far as I understand it, because I wasn't alive at that point in time, didn't really happen until like the 1950s with the rise of, so like pamphlet comics were very popular in the late 1930s through the 50s. Those were seen as very disposable. None of it was seen as particularly high art, but newspaper comics were seen as being much more respectable and as being acceptable for like a much wider age range of people to read.
So who's the audience for Krazy Kat? Actually, wait, let's back up briefly. Just briefly, should we go through the plot, or should we talk about the audience first?
Well, let's talk about the audience, because I feel like they're representative of the silent shorts that were made out of Krazy Kat between 1916 and maybe the oldest or the newest Krazy Kat short that I saw outside of like a completely unrecognizable short color series that happened in the late 50s, maybe like 1925, 26, if that. And
so who's the audience for Krazy Kat?
The audience for Krazy Kat was anybody that read a newspaper, and you have to remember there weren't radio. You could get certain things on the radio, but most radio drama, and I say this as a guy who's listened to a lot of radio drama and enjoys it, some of it was very good, 99% of it was garbage. Which, I mean, that's true of most things.
Any media.
Yeah. But newspaper circulation was maybe 5 to 10 times what it is now. now relative to the size of the population,
Mm-hmm.
because of the fact it could be printed in massive quantities on the cheap. So it was sort of, and also because the model of distributing newspapers was not to go after a specific audience or demographic, because the way that it was presumed you would make more money with the papers was by appealing to the broadest possible demographic, because you were seeing like newspapers blowing up to these massive proportions that they never did in the 19th century.
But that's newspapers. What about, now we're talking about the animated shorts. We've got movies.
Oh, the animated shorts. So the animated shorts, the audience for those probably would have been anybody going to a movie theater. Like, you figure most movie theaters in the country would not have had more than 1 or 2 screens.
Mm-hmm.
If they were a fancy movie theater, they'd have one or two really nice screens where it looked like a, very nice kind of opera theater from the early 20th century equivalent of kind of a place where you go to see the opera or something in the 18th century.
But are we just talking about adults, or are we talking about kids as well? Because we think right now of cartoons. Well, I was going to say we think of cartoons as kids thing, but there's a wide range. And if you look at animated films, there's obviously
this would have been pitched at anybody at the movie theater. So this probably there wasn't a clear sense of demography at that point as like a driving reason to or guiding influence in the creation of content. So these would have been made for basically people who recognized the comic strip characters from the newspaper, which the newspaper would be newspaper comic strip characters, especially in 1960, because you figure 1916, there's only been 1 feature-length film ever released in the United States. There were 1 or 2 feature-length films ever released in any kind of wide distribution in the United States at that point. So I actually got ahead of myself, because the big movie theaters probably weren't even built at that point. So you figure, like, if you're watching the movies by then, I'm not even sure how people primarily saw movies at that point, but it would have been a much more rare thing to see a film than to read a newspaper. So, like, newspaper comic strip characters were vastly, vastly more famous than anybody in movies, even like Charlie Chaplin at that point. Like, more people would have known who Little Nemo was than who Charlie Chaplin was, in all likelihood, at least in the United States.
I'm imagining people going, instead of to a theater, even a small theater, them going to, I don't know what they're called, but they're kind of like these tall boxes, and you go in and you
like a Nickelodeon.
Like a Nickelodeon. You put your nickel in, and you watch a few minute short, and then the next person in the line gets to watch it.
Right, and you have to crank the thing yourself after you put the nickel in.
Yeah. I mean, is this what we're talking about, or is that earlier?
This would have been a little bit later than that, I think. Although, I mean, Nickelodeon still would have been like things you would see out and about at that point.
So you put another nickel in to the Nickelodeon, put another nickel in, and I don't remember. And then you see Krazy Kat. I'm sorry.
The only ever real life Nickelodeon I ever saw, the short that was in it was the Edison electrocuting an elephant 1 minute short. I don't know if you ever saw it. It's literally just a 1 minute shot of an elephant being electrocuted from 1903. There was a Simpsons episode where like Lisa sees it and she gets an elephant. Probably the most disturbing of, we should do an episode on like feature documentaries at some point, because those Edison shorts are like fascinating to look at, because there's literally, nobody has any idea what film is supposed to look like at that point. Most of them are just like 1 minute shots of a thing happening, and then it's just given a plain title of workers leaving the factory, or train leaving the station, or, electrocution of an elephant in this case.
So and the world as a whole already doesn't like Edison because of what he did to Tesla. So now we have even more reason to despise him. We've had it all along.
He was not a nice guy.
Or was that just in I'm going to use this term again. Was that in concert with the prevailing attitudes at the time? So that shocking an elephant, no big deal. That's what you do with elephants.
Well, you figure a lot of the population was still living on on farms where they were like actually killing animals to feed themselves. So the idea of an animal dying in a public or like a public execution of something that wasn't a person wouldn't have been as shocking as it is now.
Da-da-da.
Right. And so yeah, it would have been seen as some kind of like large spectacle. Like, and also like our modern standards. You ever read any histories of Coney Island?
No.
So about 10 years after the Titanic sank, there was literally a ride you could take at Coney Island where you'd sit on a fake boat, and they hired guys to shake the boat as hard as they could. You paid 5 cents, and the idea was the thrill of reliving the sinking of the Titanic. Right down the street, you'd buy like a handful of softballs, and like you'd throw them at an actual black guy, and if you hit him, you got a prize.
Wow.
That was what popular entertainment looked like in a lot of ways at that point in time. So like we're talking about a very different set of cultural values than we have now.
And I'm guessing for the game you just described, that was directed primarily at white audience.
Yeah, because they probably would have been the ones with the money to burn at the carnival at that point.
Well, the ones throwing a ball at someone who's black.
Oh yeah. I mean,
that's what I meant.
Okay, so like Coney Island is the weirdest place on Earth, maybe. So there was a separate island that was part of Coney Island that was called Dream Island, and Dream Island was basically they had a bunch of tigers in cages, and they had a fake town that they recreated all the functions of a normal town, except it was just midgets in uniforms. Mm-hmm. So you got like, you know, a guy who's 4 feet tall, but he's in a firefighter's outfit, and there's like a whole bunch of them. You got like 4 foot tall police officer, and that was the whole shtick. In 1925, I believe it was, there was a fire on Dream Island. Uh-huh. The tigers all got loose, and the midget fire department had to try actually putting out the fires. So you just got like this kind of like offensive parody of a town trying to fight an actual fire while there's live tigers running around on the loose.
Oh, jeez.
And that didn't hurt traffic there. You know, in early roller coasters, you didn't have any, there was no belt buckling you in. You were just basically like holding on for dear life on a thing. And when somebody would fall off the roller coaster and die, which would happen once a year, sometimes more, traffic to the amusement parks would actually go up.
Because it's that good a ride?
Yeah, it was seen as that thrilling, right? It's like heroin addicts tend to flock to where they've heard there's a fentanyl issue because they think like, oh, that's where I'm going to get the really strong. No, that's a real phenomena, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so we're talking about it, and thankfully Krazy Kat is not, I mean, the other strange thing about Krazy Kat is that George Harriman, the creator of Krazy Kat, was the first, and I mean, for a good 20, 30 years, the only major visible black cartoonist in the entire United States.
Huh. And William Randolph Hearst was a fan.
Oh, yeah, because he didn't realize that George Harriman was black. George Harriman was technically mulatto, but he passed, and so that's a lot of, one of the kind of hidden, not that hidden subtext of the strip is he never defines whether Krazy Kat is a man or a woman. There's a lot of jokes about Krazy Kat getting covered in flour or something and turning white. And in some ways, Krazy Kat could be seen, I mean, the genius of the strip is that you can see the kind of love triangle at the center of it in so many ways. But in some ways, Krazy Kat could be seen as Harriman himself kind of reflecting on what he had to do to make it in America, despite growing up pretty much around the same time as Louis Armstrong in the same part of New Orleans.
Okay. I just need to back up briefly. Mulatto is a bit of a term that we don't use anymore.
Oh, okay, but that's how he was self-referred.
Yeah.
Back at the
there's a whole series of depending on the percentages of the different words
or Creole possibly.
Yeah. Today we would just say mixed race.
Right.
And not count the exact the exact percentage.
But yeah, he was a very private man, and nobody's looking at him as a person. They're just seeing this comic strip day to day.
Nobody's asking what his race is.
Right, and you can almost think of it as like Krazy Kat is the part of him that hates the fact that he's had to make these compromises, and the fact that Krazy Kat thinks that every time Ignatz Mouse throws a brick at him or her, that it's an indication that Ignatz is in love with Krazy Kat, as sort of this kind of weird internalized, or some kind of comment on the internalized screwed up race relations of the time.
Because Ignatz is white. Krazy Kat is black. Ignatz is white. I don't know if that means anything other than drawing a contrast between the two.
Well, no, I mean, I think like if anybody, because throwing bricks was honestly, and I just learned this last week. I'm talking about it like it was something I know forever, but
you know it now.
At the turn of the century, people throwing bricks at each other to resolve conflicts or street violence, or as an end to street violence, I guess, or bouts of street violence, was not uncommon. A lot of the big cities were in periods of massive construction. There's a lot of construction sites, a lot of loose bricks laying around, not a lot of law enforcement, particularly in impoverished areas in these cities. And yeah, people would chuck bricks at each other. So the Ignatz throwing a brick, while it's clearly a metaphor, it could very well be this like fairly resonant image from Harriman's childhood.
So that's just something that happens. Except in this case, it's not as part of a fight. Well, not on Krazy Kat's side. On Ignatz it is because Ignatz is taking out his aggression.
Oh yeah, and I mean that wasn't like the. I mean this has been talked about a lot more recently because it was brought up in the Watchmen TV show that just started on HBO a couple weeks ago. But it wasn't that strange for like a gang of white people to just decide like we're gonna go raise and pillage some black part of town. Tulsa, which was known as the Black Wall Street, you had a much more affluent black middle class than the whites that were living near them. The whites just decided we're gonna blow up the entire town and kill everybody on the streets, and then pretend that it didn't happen and it was buried in the history. Like I didn't even hear about it until like 8 or 9 years ago, when I was around a bunch of like political anarchists that were obsessed with looking at that kind of stuff.
And now suddenly everybody knows about it because of Watchmen. Okay.
Yeah,
more people know about it. People.
Yeah, random acts of like fairly gruesome and horrific violence were not on racial grounds were not uncommon at that point in time. Frequently, like group actions, even. And I mean that had been going on since that. But anyway, so to get back to the Krazy.
Yeah. What's missing from all this is that we watched a cute cartoon. I mean, it is a cartoon. It was meant to make people laugh. Whether or not we laughed or not is well, it's not that it's besides the point, but it is part of the point. But
well, it's funny, they get speech balloons and they look like actual balloons. It's just like a straight line coming off of this thing that's actually shaped like a balloon.
Yeah.
And they just draw it out on the screen because obviously you don't have any sound.
And what's cool is it's not just the speech balloon shows up and the words and you have to sit there and read it. Is that you actually see it being written. You see the letters appear one at a time. So you're reading it as it's being spoken.
Yeah, it's almost like a dramatization of reading a comic strip.
Yeah. Which is more in the moment as, say, the interstitials that you get with the silent films. So if you have a Buster Keaton or a Charlie Chaplin, I realize the time frame's a little off, but
I mean Charlie Chaplin was making, and Buster Keaton were making shorts in 1916.
Oh, they were. Yeah. Okay. So I'm not.
They hadn't made features yet, but
I was correcting myself for something that I wasn't even wrong about. Wow. But you get the interstitials, and sometimes you get dialogue, or take a Cecil B. DeMille film, and it's full of those. Right. You're not seeing speech balloons show up in the middle of a live action shot. You're getting a static interstitial. You're not seeing the words appear. So in that sense, this was more in the moment. It was more at the moment that the dialogue is spoken than you get in a live action movie or live action short.
Yeah, and I think that would have been almost impossible in those films unless you literally were going to hold up a big wooden board, right? Because like it was very hard to superimpose images on top of each other at that point. point.
No green screens.
Oh God, no green screens. I mean, maybe you could do some kind of really simple back projection. That's what they do in some of the, like, Buster Keaton was a huge innovator with that. Like Sir Sherlock Jr., he does that great gag where he jumps into the movie screen and then it keeps cutting to different, like, random, like, B-roll footage, basically. Do you ever see that one?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. Oh, the one and the one I'm thinking of is when you see multiple versions of him.
Oh, that's called The Minstrel Show. To bring us back to
great name. Yeah.
But he plays every single person, including the audience and the band, at the Minstrel Show.
But you're seeing multiples of him at the same time.
Right.
I don't know. That's the closest I can think of, is if you had one part of the screen is him, and another part of the screen is just the speech bubble.
Yeah, and that could have been a way that.
Hey, why didn't they do that?
That is really an interesting.
I'm gonna go back.
Question, yeah.
I'm gonna go back to 1916. I'm gonna go up to Buster Keaton. I'm gonna whisper in his ear, "See what they do in Krazy Kat? You could do this too, and here's how."
Because it's not like a
$1 million idea. Okay.
Well, it's not like a foregone historical conclusion that movies couldn't have ended up looking more like comic strips, because comic strips were incredibly popular at the time.
Yeah.
And I think did do a lot to influence the visual vocabulary of film in ways that film scholars have not necessarily recognized, just because the history of comics took such a starkly different turn in the middle of the century than, film did.
This isn't exactly the same, but in terms of live action movies and cartoons, you've actually got so many of the superhero and science fiction films and all sorts of films that are, so much of it is CGI rendered. So you've actually got the so-called live action movie is actually a big giant cartoon.
Right.
That's made to look like real people in real situations, but it is a cartoon.
Right. And that's like a really weird trend, right? Because Disney, they're remaking a bunch of their cartoon films as like fake live action films.
Right, they're fake live action films.
The Lion King, and I think they did Aladdin. They did
Aladdin, which, by the way, it wasn't half bad. I enjoyed it. I even enjoyed the added songs. So I guess the added songs are from the Broadway musical.
Bonus track.
But yeah, I don't know if that's a guilty pleasure or not, or a guilty admission that I enjoyed the Aladdin movie.
Well, and I think with the Krazy Kat cartoons that we watch, one of the interesting things to kind of like drawing from this history of animation is like, here's this literal adaptation of a 3-panel comic strip, to here's this thing that's kind of thinks that the highest achievement in cartooning is pretending you're not a cartoon. It's very strange to me, because like a lot of what would have been considered funny at the time about the Krazy and Ignatz cartoon is the cartooniness, the way that the characters were drawn, the way that they're exaggerated, the way that they look ridiculous.
Right.
And then now you have, and I mean, granted, I'll admit, I think the last full-length CGI film that I sat through was Megamind, and that was like a long time with Tina Fey and something else, but
oh yes,
they look really ugly to me.
What?
Something about like the fact that the shapes of the characters have to be so consistent. The physics are kind of vaguely trying to follow the physics of the real world. It just seems very confined and constrained in a way that earlier animation based around kind of people doodling things, or at least the aesthetic of someone doodling something.
The characters get to be squishy.
Yeah, the characters get to be squishy. They're moving around. They're doing...
We get to Felix and his tail turns into an exclamation mark at one point, or he turns it into a fire hose. It doesn't always have to be that same, okay, Felix is 3 feet high and the tail is 2 feet long, and always make it, okay, the tail can swing around a little bit, or, maybe swing around to the front or whatever, but God forbid if it ever turns into an exclamation mark.
Right, like somebody showed me one of the musical numbers from Frozen a couple weeks ago at a party, and...
Let it go, Dan, let it go.
Let Frozen go? Or Or is that a line from Frozen?
Oh, you don't even know the reference?
No.
Oh. Okay, you definitely haven't seen it.
Well, I saw like one musical number on somebody's phone, but to me it looked like a high budget version of one of those like music videos that people made out of Sims characters.
Interesting.
It just kind of, it looks too, and maybe some of this is Uncanny Valley problems where it's like, I'm kind of like thinking to myself, like, shit or get off the pot. Like, if you want to use real people, shoot the fucking thing with real people. If you don't want to use real people, then like get a cartoonist, right?
Uncanny Valley stuff just totally messes with my mind. I can't handle that. What was the Richard Linklater one?
Waking Life or Scanner Darkly. He did two of them.
Oh, he did two. Oh, okay. I know I saw Waking Life, and I was squirming. And I can't watch. What was Tom Hanks' Christmas one with a train?
Oh, Polar Express.
I can't watch Polar Express. That already, like, seeing the trailers for it was too much for me. And that's not even quite as extreme. But no, Let It Go. That's the main song from Frozen. Let it go,
okay.
Let it go.
That might be the one I saw. I was kind of drunk. I was kind of drunk when I watched it.
All right.
And I also was seeing it on a phone, so like I don't know if that making it bigger would make it better.
I'm still singing it under my breath. Let the storm rage on. The cold never bothered me anyway. Wow, I butchered that song, and I don't know how many times I've sung that. And when I was in the hospital, we would all run around singing "Let It Go" all through the halls. That was actually where I first saw the movie. Somebody brought me a DVD of it, and we all got to watch it and then run around singing it. So. But anyways, backtracking, Uncanny Valley. Krazy Kat being squishy and not having to stick to the exact dimensions, and it's almost like current cartoons they're immobile. It's like they're frozen from the way you're describing it. Yeah. They're frozen in their body.
Yeah, like something that always, I guess, what kind of always appealed to me about cartoons was the scratchy informality of the drawings, of the movement, of the fact that like everything is sort of not quite consistent from frame to frame, and you're in this space where the normal rules of physics and what objects can be are just thrown out the window. There's no, and that's what I loved about a lot of the Felix the Cat shorts that we were watching. Just sort of, his tail becomes a fire hose, his tail becomes an exclamation point, he's pulling a kangaroo out of a bag that's like 1/10 the size of the kangaroo.
The bag transformed. Well, this is not
the bag transformed into a canoe. Yeah.
Although that was his magic bag of tricks, so you'd expect it to be able to do that. But Felix himself doing that sort of thing. Although we're jumped to Felix. We've moved on from Krazy Kat without having actually talked about what was in the cartoon.
Well, I mean, okay, so the plot summary of the cartoon, I guess, was Krazy Kat says to Ignatz, "Why are mice such cowards?" And Ignatz is like, "I'm not a coward, I'll show you." He looks up some lady's dress, and then the lady goes, "Eek, it's a mouse."
Well, he says boo.
Oh, he says boo, okay. And then Krazy Kat says, "Oh, that's not such a brave thing to scare a lady. Look." And then Krazy Kat runs in.
He says spoof.
Says spoof, and then she like whacks him with him or her with a broom.
Right. A cat of indeterminate gender.
Yeah, but apparently that one was more of like Creeper Cat.
Yeah, they went into the women's changing room. I don't know, I couldn't tell. Was it a changing room? Was it a bathroom?
Something like that, yeah.
Either way, it's creepy. I mean,
well, they were in benches at the circus, so I'm gonna guess it was like a changing room.
Okay.
Right, because there were those bleachers at the beginning of the cartoon.
Yeah. That was the circus part, which was, they happened to be at the circus when they had this little discussion and the little bed. But either way, okay, it's creepy if we think of them as human, but they're just a cat and a mouse. So it's okay for them to go, walk into the changing room and sneak up on a woman who's getting undressed.
Yeah, I mean, we have a cat in the pod cat walks in on me getting ready in the morning, like pretty frequent. I mean, I've come out of the shower because the cat fucking loves the humidity in the shower, and I won't realize she'll like sneak in as I'm going into the shower. I get ready for the shower. I don't notice the cat's in there. And then I walk out of the shower and she's sitting on the toilet just staring at me, just taking in the humidity. It's like, that is, so maybe that cartoon was more real than I'm giving it credit for.
Especially when you saw the podcat's tail turn into an exclamation mark. No, I'm just kidding. It was a question mark.
And it was funny because we were watching these with the podcat for a couple seconds, and then the podcat gave me this look like, what WTF is this shit? And then walked out and has not come back in since. So
it knew we were thinking about him. It knew we were preparing for it. Okay, so that was one episode, and the other one was the bugologist.
And you want to summarize that one?
Krazy Kat and Ignatz go into the woods, and they see a bee that they... Krazy Kat says, "Oh, that bee is sleeping, and that bee must be cold." And Ignatz says, "No, it's dead." And Krazy Kat says, "Oh, it's cold." So they take their hat off and put it on top of the bee, and then said further to keep it warm, sit on top of the hat. The bee wakes up, stings Krazy Kat. Krazy Kat jump, and what's the final punchline?
Can't remember.
Oh, maybe just says to Ignatz, "Hey, see, it was alive," or something.
Right.
I don't know. The main thing was that the bee here, Krazy Kat was trying to help out this bee. Ignatz was being a jerk, but it's Krazy Kat that was being really nice and helpful. And what does the bee do? The bee goes and hurts Krazy Kat. So once again, okay.
And that kind of comes back to the Krazy Ignatz relationship where Ignatz throws the bricks. Yeah, the Krazy Kat is kind of the nurturer without the sense of self-preservation that somehow survives through
and gets punished for it.
Yeah,
but then let's see. But doesn't have a mean bone in their body, because they don't then turn back on Ignatz and say, "Stop hitting me with those bricks. You're mean." Or it's like, "Oh, let me hit. I'm gonna hit you back. Oh, by the way, you're a mouse. I'm gonna eat you." Or try and swat the bee. And they're like, "Oh, okay, bee was alive. Yay!"
Right. Like a lot of times in the comic strip, like you'll see Krazy Kat get beamed with the brick, and it's like, "My darling."
Yeah. What was that? The spelling of darling with a K instead of a G?
That's just like, so Harriman also kind of invented his own vernacular, which all the characters speak in. It's written phonetically. When you're first trying to read the comic strip, especially now, at the time, phonetic spellings were fairly common in comic strips because a large portion of the audience would have been immigrants, so they wouldn't have been that concerned with spelling because levels of literacy were variable. They would have been following the pictures as much as the words.
Okay.
And it also was a way to, a lot of the humor, say, like Milt Gross, who wasn't a newspaper comic, but was a great humor comics writer in the late 30s, 40s. A lot of the humor in his strips that doesn't come from the weird distortion of bodies and shapes comes from his, like, incredible ability to mimic, like, old Jewish ladies complaining for humor. And he published an entire book where it's just, like, spot illustrations and these two, like, old Jewish ladies screaming out their windows in a tenement. Like, "Oh, do you see what Morty did?" that kind of thing for like 100 pages. It's hilarious. Yeah, it's still hilarious now. But, and that would have been part of it. What's kind of weird about Krazy Kat is that it's not, you can't really pin the dialect down to a specific, or down to being kind of an abstracted representation of a specific ethnic dialect. I'm sure there's bits and pieces of lots of other stuff, but like Cats and Jammer Kids, that was an incredibly popular strip back then, very clearly making fun of like somebody who German was their first language and they just come over.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of some other ones, but
so I actually, when I saw that and saw Darling with a K, and my first thought was, is this Eastern European, and more specifically Eastern European Jewish? And that's part of why I was curious. Other than why a K instead of a G? Why make it silent, unvoiced? But I know, say, my grandmother used to call us in the diminutive. There was a Calais in there, so it's Ron Calais. And I won't name the names of anybody else in my family, but let's say you'd be Danny Kush, or I don't think it would quite work as Dan Calais, but there's always this K in there and this NK. So that's what it reminded me of, and I don't know that it had anything to do with that. It's just what I was hearing as I was reading.
I think like different pronunciations could also have like an emotional connotation. Probably, I'm just gonna read from an actual Krazy Kat strip. Just, this is one word bubble. It's gonna take me a couple seconds because the writing is so bizarre. A rempot in Uiri, a snowboig in the desert, sunshine, white mesa.
That sounds like several dialects combined.
Right, like a canvas and paints, pencils and brushes, the oig of art soiges within me.
Yeah, that again sounds like several
Right.
dialect, or not dialect, but what's the word I'm trying to think of?
Yeah, and it seems like the different animal characters have their own. Yeah, because like the judge in the court, how dost you arrest this dear cute little mouse for something he never did, accusing him of tossing a brick at a cat. Yeah, right, and that's like completely different. I mean, Krazy Kat definitely has the strangest.
I'm trying to understand that first sentence. How dast you arrest? So what is DAST even in the context of that sentence? How dast you arrest?
How dust?
DAST.
How does you arrest?
Oh,
it's
okay.
like it's not great. It's not grammatically proper English,
Yeah.
but
So it's not grammatically proper and it's pronounced oddly.
yeah, and that's kind of like one of the most
Pronounced unusually.
off-kilter kind of things in the strip. And yeah, and like Officer Pup, he always speaks in this really weird passive phrasing. The gall of him trying to chouse me, right? Like chouse is a way of saying rouse, CHOUSE.
Okay.
With such cheap chicanery, right? It's just it's singular. It's not really. There's never been, and there probably never will be another comic strip quite is like subtly strange as Krazy Kat.
Are the dialects consistent? So are the words so Darlink was common, but
Doodle was very common with Krazy Kat. That's like
Okay.
something that Krazy Kat says quite a bit throughout the run of the strip.
But some of the other words, I mean, is it the same as a few episodes ago you mentioned Doctor Strange?
Yeah, little Dollink, and again here's Krazy Kat dressed up as a ghost, going back to the like passing thing.
Little Darlink, I'm fulfilling.
I'm fooling he, which is
I'm fooling.
Krazy Kat saying I'm fooling him.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm fooling he. I'm fooling FULLING he instead of fooling him. Okay, got it.
Is it not dangerous for a mouse to pass too close to a cat, Papa? Ah, my son, I should jolly well say yes.
Okay, these are British. These are upper crust, complete with bowler hat.
Oh yeah, and I think like a lot of the humor at the time would have been. I mean, a lot of the humor at the time is based around like ethnic stereotypes, as that's kind of the set of comedic types they were drawing from. So it's very hard to extract the immigrant culture stuff, the like structural racism stuff, and the I guess what the art that exists outside. Although I guess art doesn't really exist outside of its historical context. You kind of have to take it in that stride, but
it does if you don't know the history.
Right, and that's dangerous. That could be very dangerous.
Yeah. I could easily have just watched Krazy Kat, the cartoons I watch now, without knowing anything. Well, in fact, I did until you explained it to me. I enjoyed them regardless. I wouldn't apply them to anything and suddenly, show them to the world and say, look, this is the end all be all. And you tell me, well, actually, that's an extremely racist cartoon. Let me tell you the background. Which wasn't the case here, but as opposed to, well, actually, this leads us into Felix.
Yeah. So Felix the Cat, we have the smoke scream. Which...
Wait. I just got to say one thing.
Okay.
I did not mean that Felix the Cat is a racist cartoon, which is I would, as a whole, I would hate to say that because I love Felix the Cat. I mean that we watched one of the cartoons was actually racist. But back to what you're saying.
And it was like weirdly, yeah. So the smoke scream is very funny. It's from 1928. I recommend you see it. Basically, Felix the Cat's owner, who's an old man, Felix gives him, he loses his pipe. Felix gives him a phonograph horn as a pipe. It sets his beard on fire. Somehow running away to get away from his own beard. He ends up in a house. The house burns down. There's a lot of funny sight gags. But I think we should probably jump right ahead because it fits so well with the discussion we're having. Yeah. Uncle Tom's Crabbin', another Felix the Cat short from 1927.
And I specifically asked that we watch that one when we were flipping through the options, and I saw that name. Like, I gotta see what that one is because that does not sound like a proper name for a modern day cartoon, at least. I'm like, what's hiding back behind that name?
And I mean, it is like a very short retelling of Uncle Tom's Cabin using Felix the Cat. And it's hard to say. So you see an incredibly stereotypical looking adult black man playing a banjo, which, to bring it back to the Krazy Kat discussion, we often see Krazy Kat playing a banjo in a pose very similar to the kind of like plantation pickaninny stereotype.
Wow.
Except Krazy Kat doesn't look like that. And so it's like another confused ethnic image.
Interesting.
But anyway, so we see, and there's a
little girl.
There's a little girl. Yeah, they're all kind of, and Felix is like having a good time. Felix is apparently enslaved in the South in the pre-Civil War period.
No, he was just visiting, wasn't he? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I guess he's always visiting, right?
But he ends up kind of joining along, and he's dancing along with the little girl, and he's having a good time.
And then Uncle Tom shows up.
No. Simon LeGree.
No. Oh, Simon. Yeah.
Uncle Tom is the black guy.
Oh wait, okay. I never actually read that book.
Oh, okay. No, Simon LeGree is the bad guy.
Okay, yeah. So the slave owner, the guy who looks like, again, a stereotype of a Southern farmer, not historically accurate, because the person who would have been, maybe like if he was the guy supervising, the person who owned the slaves would have been fairly rich and would have looked more like upper, they would have been dressed a lot nicer. And so that might be part of the kind of cultural project to kind of say that, like, oh, the racism and brutality of the South wasn't the rich, it was those ignorant poor people, poor white people. Nothing is ever the rich people's fault, right? But I mean, the fact is the Ku Klux Klan was originally started by very wealthy plantation owners who were very unhappy that they lost all this, to them, property. But anyway, so yeah, and then we see Simon LeGree and Felix the Cat start fighting, and what was he throwing at Felix the Cat?
I don't remember. I remember he had a whip, but I don't remember if he used the whip. I don't remember what he was throwing at him.
Yeah, he was like throwing rocks or something at him, and so Felix takes the banjo that we were just seeing at the kind of hoedown and starts using the banjo to hit back at Simon LeGree. So I'm left with because it's a very confusing cartoon, because you have these very racist depictions at the beginning, but it's ultimately being sympathetic to...
Felix is sympathetic to African Americans.
Right, and he's using the tool of the oppressor to fight back, which is always a fun thing to see in the movies.
The white guy's the bad guy.
The white guy is the bad guy. At the same time, you do have a literal pickaninny at the beginning of the short.
Yeah, the depictions are horrible. I don't want to go into detail to describe them. You could, pull up anything that's...
Right.
Google search horrible cartoon stereotypes.
They look like very old you ever seen like racist old postcards from the postcard boom?
Oh, yeah.
It looks like that kind of stuff. But yeah, so it's...
So it had...
Felix is on the right side of history. The animators could have done a little better. But at the same time, like, there's not really... Probably the most progressive depiction of a black person in a comic strip that I have seen before, like 1940, 1950, is probably Krazy Kat, if we're extrapolating that Krazy Kat is in fact black because of the depiction with the banjo. Right, because like in the earlier you go with comic strips, the worse that stuff gets. Like the early history of comic strips, like culturally, is very ugly.
Yeah. Well, it's tough, because on the one we look at the history, and on the one hand, this was just typical, so it was no different from what you would expect in terms of the drawings.
Yeah.
The visual depiction. We talked about Fred Astaire and Mr. Bojangles recently.
In Swing Time, the big finale number in Swing Time.
Yeah, and it's great, and it's a great tribute to Mr. Bojangles, who was black. And how does Fred Astaire do his tribute? In blackface.
Right.
So
when we go back again to there's like 10 blackface Fred Astaires too. He doesn't settle for one blackface Fred Astaire.
I mean, so on the one hand, it's a horrible feeling, and oh my God, that's so incredibly racist. On the other hand, that was standard, and it was, it's a big deal. This, I may be making more of a big deal than it was. I don't know, but it's a big deal that, hey, you've got this famous white guy who's doing a tribute to a famous black guy who's a big entertainer that died. But so does that make it okay?
I mean, it's not the most offensive thing in an Astaire and Rogers movie by a long shot.
Would that be when Fred Astaire slaps Ginger Rogers?
At the end of oh God, what the one where Fred Astaire's
you told me about this a little while back.
Yeah, the Fred Astaire is a Freudian psychoanalyst, and he slaps slaps Ginger Rogers at the end of it to make her overcome her neurotic condition and realize she's in love with him.
God.
Like, I swear to God, this is a real. I have it on the shelf over there. I forget the exact name, but
it's a classic. It's a well-beloved classic. Although, hey, in the Felix the Cat cartoon, not this one, but the Smoke Scream, we also see spouse abuse.
Well, and that was a very, like, Punch and Judy shows were still things that people actually watched for entertainment. Back, like, you ever seen a Punch and Judy show?
Yeah.
And like for those who don't know what a Punch and Judy show is, it's basically two hand puppets. One's supposed to be a husband, one's supposed to be a wife. In earlier incarnations of it, one of them literally beats the other one to death.
Oh wow! Okay, I've never seen that.
It gets really violent, basically.
Okay.
I mean, one of my favorite, like, fucked up Christmas clips is just this kid, Santa doing a Punch and Judy show in front of a bunch of kids in an orphanage from like 1940 something. I'll have to find that. It's on archive.org somewhere. But
I think that's a good. That'd make a good double feature with The Day the Clown Cried.
Right, and these kids are just looking, it's like, why is Santa reminding me of mommy and daddy? But yeah, a lot of people expressed things in cartoon characters had a lot more physicality back then, because you think about, like, you ever seen the Lockhorns in the paper?
Yes,
right?
I was trying to remember their name, the Lockhorns.
Right, and that's kind of like a Punch and Judy show, except they're just being passive aggressive, probably because the person drawing it can't draw emotion well enough, or I mean also because the cultural mores have changed to the point where that's not considered acceptable shorthand for something, or right, like you see the last vestige of that kind of humor, I think, is like Homer Simpson choking Bart Simpson on the Simpsons,
which stopped eventually.
Yeah, they stopped doing that after. I mean, I don't remember seeing that in an episode for a very long time.
No, that was just first season. I don't know if it lasted past that or first few seasons.
Yeah,
but as the animation gets more refined, the child abuse stops.
Right. But yeah, that was a very common. And the thing is, like, you look at a lot of these other cartoons we were watching, not the Felix the Cat ones. I was surprised at how good natured they were, particularly compared to the Tom and Jerry short that we saw, or the Sylvester and Tweety shorts that we watched, or the one Sylvester and Tweety and the one Claude Cat short that we watched. Right, because we watched Tom and Jerry, Yankee, Doodle, Mouse from 1943,
which won the Academy Award for Best Animated Short Film.
And it's pretty much just like Jerry's the mouse. I always forget, right?
Jerry's the mouse. Tomcat.
Tomcat. That makes. Yeah. So Jerry is dressed all up in patriotic whatever. Only at the end of the different segments, and Tom, he basically just like beats the crap out of Tom over and over again, and then salutes the flag.
Yeah.
Or like comes up with new and inventive ways to torture Tom. And while we were watching, I said to Ron, like, if they were both the same size, this wouldn't be funny.
No.
Right? Like.
No, this would just be, it would be a fight or yeah, I hate to
Well,
sound
it wouldn't even
glib.
be a fight because, like, Jerry always wins.
Yeah. It'd be what's the word I'm trying to think? It'd be a domestic. What's the word I'm trying to think of? Domestic incident,
Domestic violence,
It'd be
basically. Yeah.
It'd be domestic violence. One person beating the other. It would not be funny, at least not, I think, by current day standard.
No, and I mean, and actually, to go back to the Felix the Cat short with the married couple fighting, the woman is drawn as being, like, very physically bulky.
Mhm.
Like, they seem like, at least in terms of size and shape, there's no clear winner if that was a street fight.
Uh-huh.
So it's almost, and actually, now that I'm thinking about it, because we watched the Sylvester and Tweety short, and it seems like a lot of that comes down to Tweety is like the ultimate domestic violence gaslighter, right? Because like Sylvester's just trying to eat and live. Granted, he's trying to eat and live this like very cute tiny bird,
Right.
but then the tiny bird just, sometimes it's Sylvester just being stupid, but other times it's Tweety kind of setting him up to be like flattened by something, or like, he gets flattened a lot. That seems to be a favorite of the card, or like dynamiting him, and then going like, "I'm so cute, it couldn't be me. I saw a putty tat.
I thought I saw a putty tat. I did saw a putty tat.
Fuckadash. Yeah. So sometimes Tweety just watches he or she. I think it's determined at one point that Tweety is male. So I'm trying to remember where I found this out. Okay, there's an errata. We haven't done
but the
errata in a while,
dynamic
but
is definitely it doesn't have to be gender specific necessarily. It's
No.
clearly they're like Batman and the Joker, right? Because like if Sylvester is still waiting on this one incredibly tiny bird for him to eat, and he hasn't eaten it by now, he would have starved to death. At the same time, Tweety does not want to remove himself from the situation, and so they're in this weird kind of violent codependency, right?
yeah, Tweety is a sadist.
Yeah.
Tweety is sadistic. Tweety isn't just working out of a sense of self-preservation. There is that. There's the veneer of it. And granted, Tweety is trying to preserve himself or their self. But there are ways that Tweety could do it by simply leaving. Because Tweety easily escapes from anything. But Tweety makes sure that Sylvester gets hurt in the process. Sometimes it's Sylvester hurting himself. So, for example, chopping down a tree, going under the tree, and then chopping the last bit. So, of course, the tree flattens him. But in another case, on the river, Sylvester is in the boat, ends up starting to go down the waterfall, starts paddling back up the waterfall because he doesn't want to end up in the waters below. And Tweety says, "Oh, I'm going to help you, Putty Tat," and closes the emergency part of closes the dam.
Right.
So that there's no more waterfall left for Sylvester to go up, and ends up falling back down into the water. Tweety didn't need to do that.
Right.
Tweety was already safe. But Tweety made sure that Sylvester, died again. I mean, Sylvester keeps dying.
Right.
Yeah. Thankfully, he has 9 lives, and those 9 lives get reset with every cartoon. But yeah, Tweety's making sure that Sylvester is badly hurt, is in pain, or dead.
Yeah, in the Tom and Jerry cartoon, it's very similar. You don't get. I think what's so weird to me about the Sylvester and Tweety cartoon versus the Tom and Jerry one, like it's very obviously war propaganda. Why they decided that Tom the Cat represented some stereotype of the Axis powers is beyond me. But they put a flag in front. Wait, don't they shoot him?
Yeah,
I can't remember if it's the Sylvester. No, it's the Tom and Jerry one.
It's the Tom and Jerry one.
Shoots him out on a rocket, and then we just basically see presumably Tom getting eviscerated, blowing up or whatever, and there's just a flag in the sky.
Yeah, the flag. It was a firework. It was a big firework, and that it's fireworks in the shape of a flag. But that's what happens to Tom. He becomes part of that the fireworks in the sky. Probably dead. That's not addressed. Yeah, till next time. His lives are regenerated. Although actually, Jerry hurts him, but until that point, does Jerry effectively kill Tom throughout?
No, there's not like a clear kill shot. There's like clearly Tom is smarting, but there's no point where it's like, oh, he blew up and or fell to the ground worse than D.B. Cooper.
Right. And in this case, actually, Jerry does to Tom exactly what Tom was trying to do to Jerry. Tom Tom tried tying Jerry to the rocket, and Jerry plays with the rope and seems like he's helping Tom tie the rope, and what he ends up doing, and Tom does in the process, is tie Tom to the rocket. And so Tom ends up in the sky.
That's like a full ado moment, right? Because like for a second you think that like Jerry is tying both of them to the rocket so they die together.
Oh yeah, wow. But we just think that for a moment. Jerry had no intention of doing that. No, Jerry had every intention of killing Tom.
So it's a full of Tom.
Well, let's see. So we covered some of the Felixes. We covered all of Krazy Kat, some of the early Felixes. We covered Tom and Jerry, Sylvester and Tweety.
And unfortunately, the copy of the Clawed Cat cartoon, No Barkin', that we saw was, we thought we found the whole thing on YouTube. In the middle of it was a Korean language advertisement for the Avengers movies. So who knows if we actually saw the guts of it. But
yeah, it felt like there were 3 minutes missing. Instead of 6 minutes, we got 3, if that. And I don't know. There's the cat. There's something. A dog appears.
It's like more of an alley cat than it's like house cat, I guess.
And honestly, I didn't miss those 3 minutes because I wasn't that interested. I didn't feel vested in the life of Claude the Cat. I don't know. Claude the Cat may have been incredibly popular at the time. Let's see. That one was in 1959. I don't know. I didn't care.
Yeah, I wasn't that invested. But I was more invested than in our final, I guess it wasn't the last one we watched.
Let's go back to Felix.
Okay, yeah, Felix. Let's talk about Felix some more, yeah.
So we jumped forward. We jumped away from Felix because we moved forward in time. So Yankee Doodle Mouse was 1943. Sylvester and Tweety was 1951. But going back to Felix the Cat, we've got Felix the Cat in the Magic Bag from 1959. And now we've got
and we didn't even talk about Neptune nonsense either. There was a lot going on in Neptune nonsense.
That's true. So you've got in between, in 1936, we moved on from black and white and no voices. That was in 27, 28. By 1936, we've got color and voice.
Limited voice, but it's like, it's almost used as like a musical emphasis more than, like, I feel like the later we got, outside of obviously the Tom and Jerry cartoon doesn't have any dialogue in it because it's a Tom and Jerry cartoon, but the later it gets, the more the use of voice and voiceover is to explain to the audience what they just saw and don't need explained to them.
Yeah, we get the let's see. Okay, what happens? Felix the Cat has 2 dogs and a fish as pets. So this is a little
Still can't get over that.
It's a little bit of a Mickey Mouse Pluto thing, right. So so this isn't unusual. But his fish is depressed. The fish fills up almost the entire bowl, but the fish is depressed. So he first tries to get to fish a fish out of the ocean, and he ends up getting pulled in by a sawtooth fish.
Swordfish.
I guess it was a swordfish.
I guess.
Yeah, it was a swordfish. Except didn't it actually have? Was it a serrated sword? I don't remember. And it was a swordfish.
I think the cartoon made like a very daring statement about depression in the fish community.
Frankly, I thought that the fish needed an SSRI or Wellbutrin, maybe even. But no. Felix decides that actually he just needs a fish companion. So he ends up in the water. He ends up underwater, and turns out he can breathe fine. So he keeps trying to catch different fish, and we see a bunch of fish gags. There's an octopus who is the traffic cop, who stops the fish from going one way and lets him go the other way, and then switches.
They have like a whole fish civilization.
Yeah.
And we even, and then eventually...
A bunch of fish live in a fish house. Felix tries to catch one of them. The fish cops show up because he tried kidnapping, and then the fish explains and tells Neptune. We now meet Neptune, who is the judge, and the fish tells him, he tried to take me from my house. As if we didn't already know. But it was important, I guess, to convey to Neptune. But that could have all been done visually. There was no need for the voice. But it was needed in order for the fish to say it like that. He tried to take me from my house.
And when they show us Neptune for the first time, he's literally just kind of looking off into the sky, stroking his trident while he's got this mermaid dancing next to his head.
Oh, I forgot about
That's
the little mermaid.
some dirty stuff right there. But
yeah, it was a little suggestive. Suggestive.
But yeah, anyway, so they end up in court because basically Felix the cat tried to kidnap a child.
Was it a child or was it an adult with a squeaky voice because it's fish? Or is there a difference?
That's a good question, actually.
Is there a distinction?
Well, I kind of figured because they go to the orphanage afterwards that it was maybe I was just projecting though. I don't know, but
that was an orphanage.
Yeah, it said orphanage at the top. That's why like.
Oh, I totally missed that.
Yeah, so like Neptune is kind of like, why are you stealing our kids? And Felix
so it was
is
a
like,
kid.
I wasn't going to steal your kids. My fish is just lonely.
Okay.
It needs a fish friend. And the fish is like, but I have a home and I have my friends and my home. And Neptune's like, wait, I totally believe this like cat that just went under the sea and started stealing our kids actually just wants like a fish for his lonely pet goldfish. And so he goes to the orphanage, aka the place for unwanted children, and just hands him one of those and says, go on your merry way. And then thankfully it all works out because Felix puts the orphanage fish in the bowl with the goldfish, and they get along.
And then they start making out.
Yeah, I mean, if I
So this is where, I totally glossed over the fact that it was an orphanage. Or I totally missed, not glossed over, I totally missed that it was an orphanage. I wasn't paying enough attention, apparently. But yeah, so there's this weird lack of distinction between a squeaky adult and a kid.
Yeah. And I mean, it's, and also just like fish, like, because fish lay eggs. That's how they reproduce.
Yeah. Wow, this is a little more disturbing than... than I realized.
Well, yeah, the second I saw the orphanage thing, I was like, this is definitely the most bizarre of these cartoons, right? Because it's sort of playing out this, like, the privileged person in, say, our society, they can't steal kids from the couple down the street unless the couple down the street happens to be homeless and the kids were taken away by CPS or something, or there were a lot of people that stole, like, Native American children that were confiscated from parents, etc. There's always this weird line in child adoption throughout history of like, is this kind of at what point are kids possibly being confiscated from their parents as a way of forcing cultural assimilation, right? And that's still going on.
Yeah. Oh, we look at Australia and the whole history of mixed race kids being taken away in order to be raised in white families.
Right, and that's like that's what always makes me kind of uncomfortable when like rich U.S. celebrities they'll kind of adopt like 9 or 10 children from different impoverished countries, and you never really hear anything, and I'm not saying like that they're necessarily bad parents, although
Brangelina.
Yeah, I mean, although they got divorced because she said he smoked too much weed, so I don't know who to side with.
That makes her a bad person.
She's
like clearly in the wrong in this one.
Mia Farrow, she had like 9 adopted kids, and Moses Farrow, one of the adopted kids, said that there was this clear hierarchy between her biological children and the adopted children, and she kind of was, at least according to him, treating the adopted children as if, there was kind of this savior complex of like, hey, I saved you from that shithole country. I don't have to like be motherly to you.
I don't need to show any affection or treat you
right. You owe me respect. You owe me, kid. Yeah. Right? Like
this isn't at all to say that Brangelina. Well, they're no longer Brangelina, but that Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. That's not to say at all that that's the way they treat their kids. And I follow celebrity gossip very little, but from the little bit that I know, I mean, it sounds like they're not at all playing the Mia Farrow role. Like guess. I don't know.
No, yeah, I mean, everything I've heard about, although who knows? And I mean, they also...
But that doesn't take away from what you were saying
it's
about
also
the white savior.
Right, yeah, there's a certain point where, like, the decision to adopt versus the decision to, I mean, you know, like, if you're moved by the plight of something in this country, collecting children is one of several ways you could respond to that, and there are definitely things suggested by the fact, especially when it's in, like, a large quantity, that always kind of strikes me as kind of odd. But, I mean, if you adopted 9 children from wherever, you know, call in. This is like the pre-taped call-in show on Mr. Show, right? We're going to tell you what the subject.
Tweet at us. We'd like to talk to you.
Yeah. If you think I got it completely wrong and I'm disrespecting your life choices, like I'm always ready to be put in my place.
Or, you know, if you'd like to tell us why it's so great that you're a white savior. By the way, just jumping back briefly, what I mentioned about Australia, and I just realized I refer to them as black. I don't know I don't know what the right term is, because Aborigine, I don't know if that's the right term either. I don't know what the right term to use in Australia for the indigenous people.
It's always a class issue.
Oh, I know.
That's the thing, is that, like, the reason they can take the kids is because one set of the people got the money and the resources through systematic racism, basically, and the other set of people doesn't have that stuff, so they can kind of get pushed around into giving up their kids.
So you've got white Australians, and you've got Aborigines, and you've got mixed. It's not white and poor. That's not the distinction. That's what I was calling for. I'm not sure if Aborigine is the right term to use. Yeah, I use the term black, and I don't know that that's appropriate either. So, the indigenous people. So it was the white Australians stealing
children of color.
Yeah, children of color. Okay, I'll use that for the moment. Anyways, there's a great movie about this, and wow, I feel horrible for not knowing the right term. I know, say in New Zealand, it's Maori, which I might be mispronouncing.
I've never been to either country, so I don't feel bad.
Same here, but one of my cousins is actually Australian. So is her mom and dad. Yeah. I refer their
I don't even have family in either.
Yeah. They're about 5 steps removed through marriage. But the one I know best, I refer to as my cousin, and I refer to her sister as my cousin's sister, and her mom is my cousin's mom, even though they're really all my cousin at that point. Anyways, yeah, I've never been to Australia either. One day.
Someday, yeah. Maybe that's...
but the name of the movie, there's a great movie about it called Rabbit
Donate to the podcast, and we'll do a special episode from... Maybe we'll watch some Peter Weir movies.
We'll do a Peter Weir?
They're not Peter... Oh, what am I
Peter
thinking
Jackson.
of?
Is that what you're thinking
No,
of?
I guess maybe I combined the two. Peter Jackson. Yeah, let's settle on Peter Jackson.
Okay,
I'm trying to remember. It's somebody Weir. There's an Australian filmmaker whose last name is Weir.
Speaking of Peter Jackson, okay.
Or no, Frears, maybe.
Peter Frears?
Oh. Stephen Frears. Let's just go, but Peter Jackson. I know he's...
So, speaking of Peter Jackson...
We just lost all our Australian listeners like in 2 minutes.
Peter Jackson is our biggest... Australia's greatest import after Crocodile Dundee.
You guys have kangaroos, right?
Actually, let's jump straight. So, speaking of kangaroos, we've got the 1959 Felix, The Magic Bag. The episode is called The Magic Bag. The cartoons are becoming more kid-friendly than what we've had up to now. So it's Felix and his magic bag of tricks, as we know from even the cartoon theme song, Felix the Cat, the wonderful, wonderful cat, and then something about a magic bag of tricks. I can't sing the rest of it without the words in front of me. And it's Felix, the wonderful cat. Yeah, so just imagine music and words in between those two. Anyways, do you want to talk about what happens in the magic bag? Because not much happens.
Not much, yeah. So there's the professor, mad scientist. What's his name?
I think he's just the professor.
The professor, okay. So some guy on the tenure track, he comes up with a periscope that can extend itself at will and bend around corners intelligently. That's not enough for him because he sees that Felix the cat has a magic bag bag, and it's like doing all kinds of crazy stuff, like becoming a canoe, and like what else does it? It does like a bunch of cool stuff.
And it turns. It's time to eat, so it turns into
it turns one loaf of bread into many loaves of bread, right? And
but not too many fish.
Right, not too many fish.
But yeah, it's not just that he gets his food out of it. Does it turn into a oh gosh, I can't remember.
Hula skirt? What do you?
No, I'm mimicking something that's flat and square that you put on the ground and you eat picnic stuff on top of it.
A picnic blanket.
Thank you. Is it a picnic blanket or a picnic table?
No, a picnic table's like picnic table's the big there's like an outdoor grill, like an open air grill. They just call those grills even if you don't have the ignition under them. But no, I think it's a picnic blanket.
Is it a picnic blanket? Okay, so it's not that big a bag. I mean, it's pretty big for a cat, but
it's like the TARDIS. It has like outside the bag, everything sort of follows the conventions of size and physics, but inside the bag, anything goes.
Yeah,
and things can go out of the bag as we see later in the cartoon.
And this bag is even more magical than Mary Poppins. Because Mary Poppins opens the bag and just stuff comes out of it, and like stuff that clearly should not be fitting in there, except that it's her magic bag. But Felix's bag transformed.
Right.
But yeah, so the professor is jealous of it, so he ends up shrinking Felix using a shrinking ray, takes the bag, and then Felix ends up. And then the professor, for some reason, in order to monitor little tiny Felix, goes on top of his building, which looks like a planetarium, and he sits on top of the building and uses spyglass to look in while holding the magic bag of tricks. Falls asleep. Felix eventually he gets the bag back. He trips a switch, and a big robot comes out, a big menacing robot. So Felix pulls a kangaroo out of the bag. The kangaroo punches the robot repeatedly,
and then pushes exactly the right button to grow Felix back to exactly the same size he was. I thought it was going a different direction. I thought we were going to get like giant Felix the Cat for a minute.
That's what I was expecting, because he just kept growing and then pausing and growing and pausing and growing and pausing and growing, and then it stopped at his normal size. I forget what happens to the professor then, or does Felix just leave?
I forget too. I like the animation in this cartoon, even though it was very limited and clearly like early TV animation, because the backgrounds have that like very appealing kind of mid to late 50s loose details painted around a couple suggestive lines, kind of like a Gene Deitch, or like the ad bumpers for Rocky and Bullwinkle, which I think are the kind of thing with all the silhouettes with the where Bullwinkle's kind of coming out of the ground as a flower. Yeah. That's one of my favorite pieces of animation of all time, because it's got like I love that kind of jaggy line. I like the character designs. At the same time, you can clearly see that the amount of money being put towards short animations after the advent of television as a mass medium, as opposed to before it, when the cartoons were meant to be shown as on film in a theater as kind of prestige-like things. There's not a lot of things moving. There's a lot of repeated. I think they found clever ways to get around. Like, I love how the professor talks, because they don't just show like lips moving back and forth. They just keep changing the shape of his mustache. I really like that.
Oh, right.
But at the same time, this is definitely the least interesting of all the Felix the Cats we watched, I think.
Yeah. And the funny thing is that the reason I love Felix the Cat is from watching this particular incarnation of Felix when I was a kid. Now, they were several decades old by the time I watched them. I was very young, but this is one of the earliest impressions that I have of anything, really. And I remember sitting and watching it. And that reminds me. So I always imagine this one particular instance of watching Felix, and I'm trying to, one of these days I'll actually have to scour through all the Felixes from that era and find the exact episode that I'm imagining in my mind that I remember. But
what happens in it?
I don't remember. I just remember some very specific, like some very like little bits of images and how I felt. But I remember one thing, and that one of the characters in it was Poindexter. And now I wish we had watched a Poindexter episode. Poindexter is clearly on the spectrum
spectrum. Which is a term that we wouldn't have used at time, because we didn't use that term. And I don't think, did we use the terms autism and Asperger's at that point? When did those come into being?
Those, they existed as terms for things, but they were not in any kind of wide use until the early 1990s, and I think wider awareness of both of them, at least in the U.S. Awareness that they exist is very high. I think awareness of what they actually are is still relatively low, and at least from my experience, like people are just kind of they don't quite know what. And granted, they're very confusing conditions because they're, I don't know, like somebody's got a bum knee. Most bum knees are going to look about the same, right? And you can look at it, it's like that guy's got a bum knee, right? And like it doesn't quite look the same in all cases, or honestly in most cases, because it is just sort of this different set of mental guidelines that's set at birth, but sometimes you don't figure out, like, oh, okay, this is what is going on until much later in life, by which point it's kind of interacted with the environment to a large extent. And, the traits can manifest themselves in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, I wish we'd have watched that.
Yeah, we'll have to do a second.
Or we could just watch another.
We could, yeah.
Just another episode after this, and we could talk about it next time.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Well, we could do it as an opener for Fritz the Cat.
There we go.
Because we are going to have to do a Fritz the Cat. So.
Yeah, that's going to have to be a special episode with guests, not just one guest, but multiple.
Yeah, that'll be our posse cut.
Yeah. Oh, we do have some guests. I want to say lined up. We do have some future guests.
Yeah, already. Hopefully we'll be having my friend Mike will be coming on, and he's got a collection of early movies about hip hop. He's going to pick a choice one that he thinks is interesting. The guy's got the most hip hop records I've ever seen in one apartment in my life, so I feel like he's going to turn up something pretty exciting. So stay tuned for that.
And then we've got.
I think there's another Mike on the schedule too.
There's another Mike. There's another Dan, and there's the Potteraptor.
Yeah. So if your name is Mike or Dan, you have a pretty good chance of showing up on this podcast, apparently.
Yeah. That's it. So let's see. So the Felix the Cat Magic Bag is 1959, and then then the next. Let's see. Should we talk about the last Felix or?
Well, we watched the opening theme for Twisted Tales of Felix the Cat from the early to mid 90s, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
And it's got some really primitive CGI of like a very Windows 95 screensavery looking Felix the Cat.
It's a little better than that. I mean, you get a 3D like perfectly round Felix, which is I don't want to say ahead of its time, but
it's really novel at the time. It was like an exciting.
Yeah.
I remember the Marvel cartoons in the early to mid 90s when those came on. They would always have like a little token bit of CGI in the intro, and you just be like, "Whoa, that looks so cool!" There were full CGI cartoons that were aired around that time. There was Transformers Beast Wars. That was one of the first ones. And there was Reboot, which Reboot is actually pretty fun. It's like this technically like a kid's adventure cartoon, but it's just like a bunch of computer programming jokes basically. It's hard to describe.
Bottom line was that.
But it was CGI. The animation on all of those is hideous.
Okay.
But Reboot's fairly entertaining despite the hideous animation.
But yeah, so we didn't actually watch an episode of Twisted Tales of Felix the Cat, but I believe I own them all. I just I ran them across. I think I still have them. I ran across them randomly at some, at the cheap bin at the store. I didn't know that this thing existed, and I love Felix, so I took it, watched them all. They are very odd. They are out there, and I was something in me just didn't feel right because this wasn't the Felix that I knew and loved and remembered. Now, granted, I don't remember the last time that I saw Felix the Cat cartoon, but at that point...
Oh, yeah, you had another Felix first today. You played halfway through the first level of the Felix the Cat game for the Nintendo Entertainment System.
That's right. Which did feel a lot like the Felix the Cat that I knew and loved. And he had the Felix, he had his magic bag of tricks. So I was very happy to play that for all of 5 minutes. Then I got tired of constantly dying, and it wasn't it wasn't enough for me to play anymore. Yeah, maybe I'll have to bring the DVD over so you can watch a couple of episodes. All right.
Okay, so we're on to the last, and we saved the least for last because chronologically it's at the end. So we watched the second to last episode, I think, ever of Heathcliff.
Yeah, I hope that was ever. It turns out that there were two series, one that ran from 1980 to 1981, and then the second one that ran from 84 to 86. The episode we saw is called The New York City Sewer System, in which Heathcliff, and by that I mean his owners...
for those of you who don't know, like, Heathcliff is like a shittier version of Garfield. I'm not saying that. I come here not to praise Garfield, but to bury Heathcliff, as the bard once said.
Oh my God, the way you just raised the stature of both Heathcliff and Garfield. I do remember when I watched these. Okay, so these were, Heathcliff was first run when I was a tween. So it wasn't, so when I was around 10, 11 maybe.
So like the age where you're stuck with whatever they're going to put on TV.
Yeah, and it was Saturday morning cartoons. Actually, no, this wasn't on Saturday morning, or at least I don't remember it on Saturday morning. I think this was like an afternoon cartoon. I can't remember. But anyways, yeah, I watched Heathcliff first run, and it was always disappointing. I did not like Heathcliff, but it's what was on.
Like the latchkey cartoons, right, where they figure it's the thing that's supposed to watch you because your parents not home from work yet. Especially in the 80s, that became a big thing. The latchkey kids. I feel like a lot of that would be the low effort cartoons.
Yeah, I mean,
like a lot of the time. Although I guess like Batman the Animated Series ran like that first run, but
yeah.
I mean, I just remember it was like a revelation when Cartoon Network started showing like a bunch of anime imports in the afternoon as the like Toonami block, because you were finally seeing like stuff that wasn't just, I don't know. I remember most of the cartoon being on when I was a kid is like might be particularly the afternoon ones weren't particularly good. Like if I went on the Nickelodeon, like, you know, SpongeBob is great, or Rocco's Modern Life is great, but if I got to some like Recess on the Disney Channel, and I was just kind of like, oh, okay, it's like, I mean, I can't say they don't want to entertain me, you know. they're making this cartoon, but I'm not excited for this.
Yeah, and I can't tell for Heathcliff, were they actually trying to entertain the audience, to entertain kids?
No, so this is one of the
worst just string them along.
Pieces. This is one of the worst, most uninspired pieces of animation I've ever seen in my life. This episode of Heathcliff, like nothing in it is funny. There's nothing even unexpected from an angle of like there aren't interesting fuck ups. It somehow manages to strike that fine tightrope like balance between not being interesting and not being interesting for the wrong reason. It's just boring. It's poorly drawn. Nothing moves in an interesting way. You somehow have like an animated cartoon where most of the jokes are supposed to be things that the characters say, like they don't want it to be. The only reason it needs to be a cartoon, I guess, is so you can have the cat talk. That's really the only reason why that couldn't have just been like a crappy, low budget, like live action kid show. I mean, do you have anything to...
No, it reminds me of the suffering I went through watching this, because that's the only thing that was available. Because I don't think whatever else was on was either worse or not a cartoon.
The character designs are so bad. Like the grandpa looks like they just recycled some kind of animation of like a generic punk rocker on Jabberjaw and took his sunglasses off. Right? Because he's got that weird fucking hair. Like he's got the one, like it looks more like he's got a mohawk than like unnatural or not, or like some kind of exaggeration of male pattern baldness.
And a big round nose.
Right. It seems like all the humans, when they talk, they're talking slower than anyone would ever deliver a line. Like the animators are like, we can't afford to animate any of this, so like draw it out as long as you can, because the cheapest shot we can do is your character talking in front of something.
Well, it's in contrast to Heathcliff, who's a wise guy. So he's speaking at normal pace, but he's got kind of this wise guy. No, quite okay. That's totally not what Heathcliff sounds like. But
Heathcliff has like somebody in the Midwest's idea of a Brooklyn accent.
Yeah, and sadly, it was voiced by Mel Blanc. Because I recognized the voice. I know that voice. Where do I know this from? So it was Mel Blanc.
Well, Mel Blanc he didn't need money. Why did you do that, Mel?
Yeah.
How do you go from Bugs Bunny to Heathcliff?
Bugs Bunny and every other Looney Tunes character and so many other voices and so many other cartoons and movies, and somehow Heathcliff. Well, a paycheck's a paycheck.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know how many kids Mel Blanc adopted, so what were his bills, right? Judge not, lest ye be judged.
But that said, I had a Heathcliff poster. It was 6th grade, and I had a poster that I got through. Did you have the Scholastic book selling?
Yeah, the book fairs. Yeah, they'd come to the school, and then they have like the really expensive books, and my parents would always give me like $3 when they came. And so I'd always buy somewhere I have, unless it got like thrown out or something, I have a collection of like 50 or so terrible joke books. Like those like 99¢, because it was the only thing cheaper than like a pencil grip at the Scholastic Book Fair. Was like 99 rock and roll jokes, 99 president jokes.
Oh wow.
99 this jokes, that joke, and
99 dead baby joke. Oh no, they didn't have that.
No, that was just called lunch. God, we told so many dead baby jokes at lunch. But
well, I remember as a at that age getting some inappropriate jokes book that had dead baby jokes and stuff like that. But anyway, somehow out of that, I ended up with a poster of Felix the Cat.
Heathcliff, you mean?
Of Heathcliff.
That must have been some pretty inappropriate joke books if you ended up with a poster.
No, I don't remember. Out of the Scholastic Book Fair or so. I don't remember how. And buying the books, and wasn't it if you ordered so many books? Whatever. I don't know.
They'd have like a little display of stuff that was out, but then they'd also have the catalog you'd bring. Or at least, I mean, granted, I was in school after the point when you were in school, but they give you the catalog, and then the book fair would come back in like 3 or 4 weeks. But you had to have your parents like fill out like, I want this book, or
you already booked the books ahead of time. Then they were delivered to the school. That's what we had.
Oh yeah, we had that, but there would be like a kiosk when they first came to.
Oh, was there?
Or wait, no. You're right, because they give you the catalog first, and then the kiosk would be there when the other kids got their books delivered, so that like kids who didn't get books delivered could like buy something cheap so they didn't feel left out.
Okay.
And like I remember the thing everybody wanted from the catalog, and honestly, like if I found a copy of this stuff now, I'd probably still grab it, because I never quite grew up. But there was this program, there were a series of programs for Windows 95, because that was the big hot thing when I was in elementary school. One of them, I think this was the first computer program literally that I ever used, except maybe something on a TI-99 for a Texas Instruments video game console, and it was called Spider-Man Movie Maker. And you would basically they had a bunch of like sprites of Spider-Man characters, and you could create like a very primitive GIF using like that in some kind of engine based in Microsoft Paint.
And it sounds really familiar, because I think I was around when it came out.
Yeah, so, probably. Yeah. And I spent hours on that thing.
So that Heathcliff poster, that I got out of that. So now keep in mind, I'm in 6th grade. I just moved back to the U.S. Speak very little English. And I got the poster, and it's Heathcliff holding a sign, and the sign is blank. You're supposed to put in whatever you want. So I wrote in there, "Let's take a hike," and it was up on my wall. So 2 things. One day, my neighbor Ben, who was also in 6th grade, he came over and was in my room, and he was looking around, and he says, cool poster, Ron. I said, thank you, not realizing that he was being sarcastic because, one, Heathcliff wasn't cool, and two, let's take a hike made no sense. What's the point of that? So, two, remember, I still didn't speak English very well, because even though I was born in the U.S., we moved to Israel when I was 4.5, and so I'm 10 years old now, basically relearning the language, and I got "let's take a hike" confused with "go take a hike." And now that I think about it, why did I choose the Heathcliff poster? Well, for a little while, I thought Heathcliff was cool, and then I learned very quickly. Actually, wait. So the Heathcliff ran. That was between the first and second run, because that would have been 1982.
So you would have caught it like syndication.
I would have caught it in syndication. Yeah. So at that point, again, I'm new back in the U.S., and all these cartoons are fascinating. I can't believe how many they are. Whereas when I was Israel,
in Israel, do they get many cartoon, or did they get many cartoon imports? I guess in the early 1980s.
We did, but we also had Mickey Mouse. I mean, there were other cartoons, but there was only one TV channel, so there was only one show on at a time, and not all the slots were allocated to kids cartoons. In fact, most of the kids shows were educational. I mean, there'd be fun stuff in educational shows. They actually did a fairly decent job with that, and I do have actually fond memories of some of the kids shows where you don't even realize that they're educational. Yeah, so there weren't that many cartoons.
So that was a great way to end our historical tour of a bunch of cat cartoons.
And now the cat's come back. Now that she knows it's over, she doesn't like seeing her feline friends be animated.
And she wants to show you her tail in the shape of an exclamation mark. Look, she's doing it. She's doing it.
Oh my God! Yeah, she just did it.
All right. So on that note.
Yeah. All right. Until next time.
Bye, everyone.
Folks.
Oh wait, we said that backward. We broke the rules. Okay, take care, everyone.